Let's install some functional hood louvers on my RS flat hood. These louvers are from CamaroLouvers.com. They are a little bit different than what you would typically see, because instead of the louvers facing down, the louvers actually face upwards. This gives a ton of underhood clearance for things like strut tower braces. To start off, apply a good amount of wax to the hood. The louvers come with some cut templates. With a general position, the painter's tape is applied to the cut area, and this will prevent the paint from getting damaged when we're doing the cutting. Since I have a flat hood, I don't have the indentations like the IROC hoods do. And so what I did was I measured an IROC hood and used some of those numbers in this picture that I'm showing now. So I can't guarantee that these numbers will work on other flat hoods, but I've also used these numbers on 2 separate hoods that I've cut, and it worked out pretty well. Measure 10 times, cut once. Once I made sure the numbers were good, I marked up the templates. To protect the paint, I got thick plastic and covered and taped up the entire hood. And another double check before I started cutting. The death wheel comes out and the sparks start flying. So the metal on these hoods is very thin, so it doesn't take much to cut through it. The corners are cut with a small Dremel cutting wheel. Once the hole is cut, a flapper wheel is used to smooth out the cuts. A quick check, and it looks like a little bit more metal needs to be removed. Now it's time to drill the rivet holes. Again, measure 10 times, drill once. Once I ensured that the louvers were in the correct position, I then marked the holes with a marker. A quick hole punch, and the holes are drilled out. I'm using a number 20 cleco to hold in the louvers. Drill a hole, add a cleco, then repeat. Once the holes are drilled, I then double checked to see if anything needed to be trimmed. There are still a few spots where the metal needs to be ground back. A flapper wheel makes quick work of it. The rivet holes are deburred. The plastic is removed, followed by the painter's tape. And be very careful when removing the tape. If you applied wax earlier, this tape should come off nice and easily, but there is a possibility that it will peel off your original paint, so be very careful. My hood is then wiped off nice and clean. I use some Pour 15 white paint to cover up the bare metal that's left by the cutting wheel. Dry fit the louvers with some clecos. And then next up is installing the blind rivets. The louvers come with aluminum rivets, but I had some aerospace rivets laying around, so I used those instead. You can pull rivets with a hand puller, but I prefer the trusty Harbor Freight puller instead. Believe it or not, we used the same rivet gun when I worked on afterburners. We used it for temporary rivets and they work pretty well for the price. The rivet gun isn't too happy with pulling an aerospace rivet, but it will do it. Install the rivets, remove the clecos, and repeat. I like to point out that my measurements were all within 1/32 of an inch. I think I did pretty good. I'm pretty happy about these louvers. They look very good, but they also extract a massive amount of heat from the engine bay. During my autocross events, I can just see all the heat just flowing out of those louvers. So you might ask, what happens when it rains? Well, engines are mostly water resistant. That's why things like weather packs exist. I drive rain or shine with my LS1 and I have not had any problems so far. If you liked this video, consider supporting me on Patreon. And make sure to follow me on Instagram and subscribe to my channel.